1,000 years ago, medieval doctors used something called dwale as a primitive anesthetic. There was only one problem. Dwale contained hemlock. 1/10 of a gram will kill you. And belladonna, otherwise known as deadly nightshade. You would have thought the name might give a hint. Deadly nightshade. So the people who used the anesthetic usually didn't wake up. And it sounds like something out of an old Saturday Night Live skit. Wait, maybe there's a better way. And it's easy to sit here 1,000 years later and scoff in amazement at how primitive our ancestors were. In all fairness, though, they were at least attempting to explore and experiment as they gained homeopathic and allopathic knowledge. On the other hand, in our own time, when a global pandemic has killed 1 million people, and every virologist on the planet is desperately searching for a cure, the My Pillow guy had an audience in the White House. He's a big donor, no surprise there, and got the president to promote oleandrin as a cure for COVID-19. This wasn't a search for knowledge. This was a search for a fast buck. The My Pillow guy has a stake in the company that produces oleandrin, which also should surprise nobody. But that's not the real problem. Oleandrin comes from oleander, which is #1 on the top 10 list of poisonous plants. Hemlock is 2. Deadly nightshade is 4 if you're keeping track. Which means that 1,000 years from now, people will look back at our time and say the same thing about us as we say about the hapless medieval doctors. The only difference is that they didn't have a clue because science hadn't advanced enough yet. We don't have a clue because we package our ignorance as knowledge. And we must ask ourselves, how in the world did it come to this? The great writer Isaac Asimov answered the question many years ago, but we never needed his answer as much as we need it today. Anti-intellectualism, he wrote, has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. As Americans, we should find this threatening. As Jews, we should find it appalling. If there is anything that can be said about the great intellectual history of the Jewish people, it is the recognition that knowledge is honed in the crucible of a dialogue centered on a shared textual tradition. We pore over our texts with an exact parsing of every word, every letter. In fact, my teacher Jeremy Zwelling pointed out that there are 3 groups of people who parse text the same way, all Jews: Talmudists, Marxists, and Freudians. For us, chapter and verse matters. My Pillow guy does not. If we are to become woke to the role of knowledge in our lives, real knowledge, there are certain crucial elements that apply. First and foremost, humility. The search for knowledge is futile unless we recognize and embrace the fact that someone may know more than we do, to which the proper approach is to learn, not deny, to recognize facts, not make up stories, to prioritize truth, not self-interest. What we witness all around instead is the denigration of expertise. As Senator Rand Paul put it, we shouldn't presume that a group of experts somehow knows what's best. Really? So the next time my car breaks down, I'll take it to a flower shop. I mean, who needs experts? Besides, flowers are cheaper than a new transmission. Carburetor, chrysanthemum, what's the difference? The disregard for the scientific method, the driving force of the last 400 years of human progress, and by far the most rapid period of intellectual growth since we stepped out of caves, is mind-boggling. And the fact that science has now become politicized is dangerous beyond belief. Instead of exploration in search of the truth, we look for confirmation in defense of our biases. Instead of seeking to expand our sources, we seek to confine ourselves to our silos of already filtered information. Instead of relying on well-researched facts, we rely on anecdotes that tell the story we would like to hear. The motto of the New York Times is all the news that's fit to print. But now, for all too many people, they use the internet to filter information according to the principle, all the news that fits, we print. To call the consequences of this willfully blinkered ignorance devastating is to understate it dramatically. We currently find ourselves in a pandemic where 100,000 Americans or more have died unnecessarily because of disinformation. That's roughly twice the number of dead from Vietnam or Gettysburg. We find ourselves in an ecological disaster spinning so far out of control that large swaths of the world are rapidly becoming unlivable. In 2017, almost 25 million people were displaced because of sudden onset weather events, and it's gotten worse since then with no end in sight. And in the animal kingdom, a recent report says that over the past 50 years, the animal population has dropped by 70%. That's 70%. And among them, arguably 50,000 species have become extinct. And finally, as Jews, the utterly predictable consequence of ignorance is looming large before our eyes. Bizarre anti-Semitic fantasies of Jewish-led child sex trafficking, control of banks, behind-the-scenes political machinations, and satanic rituals have become mainstream, spouted by congressional candidates, popular talk radio hosts, prominent athletes, favorite actors, many of whom have access to the corridors of power in Washington. After all, if we are returning to medieval medical standards, why not return to medieval anti-Semitic standards too? And I ask, when is it okay to start being afraid? It's time to get woke. What do we do about all of this? What is our responsibility? First, we have to be firm in rejecting the idea that I saw it on Facebook, so it must be true. And similarly, we should nurture our appreciation for the wonder and complexity of truth. If it took you 2 minutes to learn about a complex issue, what you know is probably wrong. Second, many of us have developed a healthy skepticism for so-called experts, defined as anyone your company pays who comes with a briefcase from 50 miles away. And in fact, I have a book I keep close to my desk called The Experts Speak, the Definitive Compendium of Authoritative Misinformation, which contains unimpeachable statements from the leading thinkers of their time that auto emissions don't constitute an air quality problem, that Hitler is not so bad, that from Mahatma Gandhi, and home computers will never serve any purpose. And sometimes, as Ibsen said, the compact majority is wrong. But that being said, they aren't always wrong. In fact, they are mostly right, and we ignore them at our peril. When it comes to science, science must lead. Third, and this is truly crucial, we need to recognize and integrate the fact that expertise is not limited to PhDs in astrophysics and computational chemistry. In the Bible, the word wisdom includes the full range of human talents, art, music, skilled trades, and so forth. So what I'm talking about today is not elitism. To the contrary, it is about respecting the work of a lifetime, in fact, of many lifetimes. One of the major problems we face in America today is the devaluation of labor, the denigration of the skills, mental, physical, emotional, that go into being a carpenter or a truck driver, a home healthcare worker, or a cook. There is enormous resentment today for the so-called educated elite by people who feel, rightly, that they have been demeaned and ridiculed by the intellectually enlightened. It is a resentment so deep, so burning, that it leads people to self-destructive, nearly suicidal behavior, simply to own the libs and show that they don't care what the libs think. Consider, for example, the motorcycle rally held a month ago in Sturgis, South Dakota. It is calculated that over 250,000 people will become COVID infected from the event. Over 10,000 will die. 50,000 will suffer long-term consequences. The cost will be over $12 billion with a B. That's roughly $23,000 per participant. We could have paid everybody who went. That's 450,000 people. We could have paid them all $20,000 each to stay home, and we still would have saved money. A pretty steep price to pay in defense of ignorance. And clearly, a price our society cannot sustainably pay, no matter how much you appreciate a classic Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Carl Sagan wrote, "Nothing disturbs me more than the glorification of stupidity." But this is not merely disturbing, it's deadly. Wake up. Get woke. Wake up to your responsibility as Jews to bring knowledge into the world. As Rabbi Ken Spiro, a frequent guest to our synagogue, has pointed out, it is from Judaism that Western civilization has learned respect for human life, the importance of peace and harmony, justice and equality, the centrality of family, the need for social responsibility, and above all, the value of education, literacy, knowledge, and wisdom, both theoretical and practical. We should promote all of these, but as the rabbi said, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, the study of wisdom surpasses them all. We see today all around us the tragic and ominous consequences of ignorance. Let us, at this time of new beginnings, become woke to the necessity, indeed, the nobility of the pursuit of knowledge. So awake, arise from your slumber.